So I'm going to present the birth of the LGBT themed comics in France, which is very different from what you have in Northern America. I don't know what's going on in Canada. I don't know how it is in Canada. It's, you know, something maybe I will learn more with you today. And this is different for many reasons. Society in France, in Europe, is a little behind for me, I mean, because of the war, because things started here in the 50s when France was just recovering from the war. And social movements that existed and were emerging and organizing in the 50s, 60s were not in France at the time ready to begin. So you have to keep in mind this is a different world. Europe was not behind because it's behind. I mean, in terms of culture and civilization, just the context is completely different because of World War II. And this has an effect on comics, as we're going to see today. So I have tried to make sense of what has been going on. It's difficult because there is a lot of production today, there is a lot going on today, so that's a good and that's a positive sign. But it's hard to choose, oh, I'm going to talk about this, oh, I have to mention her, I have to talk about him. So I had to make some choices, but still I'm following a chronological order. And the turning point, you have to know, is the 90s and the 2000s. the 90s, the late 90s and the new millennium, that's the turning point, you know? When for you in Northern America, mostly the US, I don't know about Canada, it's rather the 70s. In the 70s, the social movements, the comics, everything went, started together and grew. Of course, it was still at the margin. But in France, it really started in the 80s, really, but it really started getting serious in the 90s and the new millennium. So after that, to finish, I will I will stress on two trends. And we've been talking about it today. I mean, since this morning, I've been hearing this. And each time I go to a comics conference, debate, everybody says that. First trend, people tend to do, especially at the beginning, autobiographical work and they share their stories. And this is especially true today, that's my second point, with the freedom of the internet. Everybody can be a creator, everybody can be an artist and find his or her audience. And the internet and the blogs were a true revolution, which explains also the birth of a new generation in the 2000s. The odds. What you see here is a bunch of covers from different works, and there is a lot we'll see later. There is a lot of works by women, but women are still underrepresented in terms of. I mean, they produce things, but they are not necessarily known. There is a lot of women doing things, but they do not necessarily claim their lesbian identity. It's really strange, and that's a French thing, it's a European thing. And it's something I miss when I am in France. You know, you have Americans are excessive sometimes, but they have a real positive attitude, which is to self-define, who they are and take responsibility of their identity. And in France, we don't really like that because it's too individualistic. It's too it's called labeling, and even very only militant people will do that because they are not afraid of this empowerment and they don't see it as limiting. But a lot of people in France, especially women who are graphic designers, graphic artists, and who have a career, will be afraid of being labeled and put into a box. I hear this rhetoric. It's not really rhetoric, but I hear this point of view a lot back in France. Even though they're not in the closet or anything, but they don't claim it as much in a militant way. And they could still be, they could still address other topics and all. That's my opinion. They would not care about being here, So that's something I don't really see as much in the US. So, let's begin. So first, the introduction. We have the equivalent of prison comics in France, but it's a joke compared to what prison comics is. Prison comics is really big now. It's well known. They sell books here. Everybody knows them. They go to San Diego Comics Con, and it's been around for a long time, right? It's been around since the late 90s. Prison comics.
Yes.
But LGBT was born 7 years ago. It was born the year when I started being serious about my work, and I thought, because I know the US very well, I was a student here. I thought, but I live in France, I thought, I wonder if there is such a thing as prison comics in France, and I started Googling, and I didn't find anything, but I missed them because they were created like 2 months later. So it's called LGBT. It was created by a man called Jean-Paul Génequin, who is he's an artist. He's also a translator. He's very much into the English-speaking world, hence the initiative. And we've had debates since the creation of LGBT. LGBT started going to the equivalent of the San Diego Comics Con in Angoulême. Angoulême is actually my hometown, happens to be. So I was there the year when they were there with a booth, but I missed them. I didn't know they had been created. And it has a booth. I was there the year later, and I can tell you, it was in 2009, so I joined them in 2009. I was at the booth with them, and people were looking at us like that and ignoring us. Oh, yeah, and still, we are in France. It's not a bad country to be gay, to be honest, except, in rural areas, of course. But if you make the comparison between New York and Paris, even in Paris, you're much more free in New York to make the comparison of two things that can be compared, right? People are much more judgmental still in France about it, especially when people claim, something, identity, we have rights. People tend to, in France, people tend to worry about it. People tend to think, this is excessive, this is a little weird, So people were looking at us strange. People would come to the booth and not realizing what it was and then jump back when they realized, stuff like that. In 2 or 3 years, this totally stopped also because things happened, in French society. In the next slide, it really evolved. I saw it happening. After that, I was there every year, and we've had debates about different topics. So Jean-Paul Génequin has been organizing all this. We had the right to be there. There was no problem about our presence, of course, which as I said, there's no problem being gay in France, legally and all that, of course. But still, there is some prejudice about the legitimacy of gathering under the label of LGBT-themed comics. Like, what are you trying to do? What is that thing? Is that porn? So we've had really interesting debates, and today the main debate is, as I said, is that a label, like a negative label, limiting label, to call ourselves LGBT authors? Personally, I have no problem labeling myself as an LGBT author, because that's what I am. I'm a lesbian author, but I do not feel that it limits me to only that. I can add other adjectives. But for some people, it means that people will despise you and put you into a box. What I think is true is that it's weird to say there is a LGBT comics. For me, and we prefer saying that there are LGBT-themed comics, sometimes made by straight people. It's a theme, it's a topic, it's not a genre. You know, it's not a genre, it's a topic. It deals with LGBT issues in one way or the other. So most of us agree about this, but it's still very tense. I have an argument last week, and it was really hating people to label. I said, no, I'm just inviting you to join us and share. But some people really don't like it. And then there is also the other attitude of people who really want to be that and only that, but that's really rare. So social change in France and the effect on comics. As it was the case in the US, homosexuality was not in comics as something normal. But as opposed to what happened in the US with the censorship, you had something here, what was the name of it? The same thing for Hollywood, you know, I forgot the name of it. So you could not...
Blacklist?
What?
The McCarthy era?
Exactly, that's, yeah, but there's a name to that. But
yeah, there's
same thing for Hollywood, the movies. Rules about sexuality, how to represent it, and clearly homosexuality could not, we never had such thing. In France, taboo is enough. You don't need to make laws for censorship. So France is, in a way, more free than the American society, which very often is very Puritan. France is more woo, but that's only an appearance. France is not Puritan, but France is sometimes very prude. Very prude, and there are a lot of taboos, just like in any society, and this is enough for people to to indulge in self-censorship. So no gay comics until the 80s. So before, homosexuality was one example. I could have mentioned others. Or homosexuality, like Johnny Le Rocker, Lucien, sorry, Le Rocker. Homosexuality used to stress heteronormativity. Homosexuality is used, is made fun of, and it is used to reinforce manhood, you know, and actually, I read that as a kid because I was in Angoulême and I remember that thing. So it's very traditional, macho, and of course there was a mention of homosexuality just to make him look more manly and great, you know. So in the 60s, France did have some social movements and gay militants existed, but nothing compared to what was always there with different. Right? In the 50s here, people were picketing, the Mattachine Society, the daughter of Bailaris were picketing. It was big, but still, you know. So everything in the ground and the 50s was, you don't even imagine, everybody knows what Mai 68, c'est une révolution sociale. So that started, you know, to change everything. But what really changed French society was in the 80s, the election of President François Mitterrand, you know, and he was elected because French people were ready for a change. It was left-wing. Before that, since the war, it had been center-right, you know. The president before that was center-right, but did really good things for French society, like modernized the law. Giscard d'Estaing, the law on abortion was voted in 72, so a lot of things were changing. Women's rights were changing. Feminism along with gay rights, of course. In the 80s, France started to have gay prides, gay marches, but it was really, you know, slow. He really saw the big identity and deconstruct the world that and it's still politics. Not really, but something like that, because most militants in French LGBT groups are very much influenced by the American movements, as it is the case in Canada, I'm sure, and very much influenced. So, in the late 90s, the PACS was voted. The PACS is the domestic partnership in France, and it changed a lot of things. It was like a pope, and all of a sudden, all young people, I was 20 of them, so I know, all the young people started making groups, creating groups, and that year, tons of university LGBT groups were born. And we met at the time, it was a big thing, and comics were starting to appear as a consequence, and that became a legitimate topic, more or less. Today, as you know, we have gay marriage, and it has become a mainstream issue. Although for me, as compared to here, if I compare, places that can be compared, if I make generalization, it's still not a topic which is, oh yeah, whatever. Here you have that. In France, it's still, oh yeah, oh, wow, LGBT, oh yeah. It's still something a little touchy, still something a little strange. We are learning about it, the mainstream, yeah, we are learning about it. It's a little nuts. So in 2 examples, people started being creative about being gay. Macho Girl by Sophie Labelle. Sophie Labelle is this punk artist from the 80s. She's awesome. She was part of a group, very alternative graphic design group called Bazooka, known in the artistic world, but not known to the mainstream audience. So she made comic strips like that, black and white, and she makes me think of Jennifer Kemper as a star. But her main character was kind of her. It's a télé character. She has a TV in place of her head. A little strange. It's kind of her, and she's explicitly a lesbian. And her nickname was at the time Electric Clitoris. Anyway, it's clearly lesbian, but she's not claiming it. It's like natural punk alternative stuff. So it was still at the margin, but still it was published by an editor, Les Humanoïdes Associés. Still alternative, comic strip publisher, so we're still at the margin. And the Mariage de Roberto, I remember that very well. That I can't remember because I was in elementary school. That I remember because I was finishing high school. The late 90s, Le Mariage de Roberto. Very funny. Cuneo is the author. He's a French author. He's ours. He made that and stuff. But really, he came from Argentina. He's from Argentina, but he was very active in Paris. He still makes a lot of arts and stuff. But just like to remind, he's from Argentina. And he published this very funny book about a couple getting married with you see the Sisters of the Perpetual Indulgence. Because we have them in France. They are everywhere, right? You have groups everywhere. And they are getting married and they're asking the Pope to marry them. It's a crazy comic strip. And I was really inspired by that comic strip and other things I will mention later, when I was a kid. And I thought, wow, and this Édition Gay Lesbienne just started. They are friends of mine now. They got married two years ago. It was a couple of lesbians. They had this publishing house, which is now over. There are other things now, other LGBT publishing houses, but there is no LGBT comic strip publisher in France. There are publishers specialized in LGBT issues, but no specialized in visual arts and comics. So this was an exception. And 5 years after that, I published my first comics with them, Édition Gay Lesbienne. That was the only 2 comic strips they edited. So you have to know that French people who were LGBT were looking for representations of themselves in different medium, including comics, and all LGBT person who likes comics looks for things in the US mostly, but also very famous German author Ralph Koenig. So all lesbians in France who are kind of involved in militant, activism, militant activities know Alison Bechdel and Paige Braddock. They all know them. And to me, as a young baby dyke, I was, of course, in love with Alison Bechdel's work. But I was lucky enough to be in high school in the U.S. and study in university. I would always come back, so I knew Odette Payson, but nobody knew them. And Jennifer Kemper, I was a big fan. So that really helped. But most people read and didn't do. And this is what I did for a long time. I didn't draw anything. I didn't do anything. Because it felt like it would go nowhere. It wouldn't go anywhere. You have this culture in Northern America and in some European countries as well. You have this culture of zines. And it's not as developed in France. It is more developed now, but much more limited to an artistic, hipster, young, artistic circles. It's not as spread out as it is here in bookstores and, So I think that didn't really help people being more creative. Basically, if there is something very positive in Northern America that I would like to stress on, that I see is lacking in Europe and in France, is this creativity. For some reason. It's true, there is a dynamism going on here. It's not only negative things. To tell you. So in the 90s and early 20s, it started being more organized. So people started to gather and do things. That was new. And those people were mostly amateur artists. But sometimes they went to an art school. But anyway, they gathered. There was Bulguet by Jean-Paul Genequin. Very how do you say, like do-it-yourself type thing. And then Les Marsouines was totally like radical lesbians with pseudonym. I don't know who the hell they are until today. They're living in a farm somewhere in the southwest of France, probably, eating rabbits alive. So I don't know, Les Marsouines, but at least they were creative and they were doing this, and they put this together. It was self-published and it was in bookstores, and I bought mine in the Paris bookstore. So crazy rabbits, but creative. And Hercule and Lafayette in the late 19th, but very rough. And both men and women, and this is to what is. So they really, the fact that it didn't work was because they were too early, I think. They were at their time, that's why it lived. There was not yet an audience ready to read it and eager to read what people locally were producing, which I think is a shame. Hugues Barthes today, Hugues Barthes is the one who started it. Hugues Barthes now is published by mainstream publishers. He went to an art school and he is openly gay, and he published books with Hachette about a young gay man, and so he made his way. In the late 90s and early odds, there was really a piece of work that made a difference. And I remember reading it. It was a shock for two reasons. First of all, there was that gay theme, although it male, but still, strip that was this I didn't know it existed when I was younger. It was not out there, but this was out there. I had read in a live, so it was out there. And it happened to take place in my hometown, Angoulême, which is, as you know, the capital of comic strips in France. Why? Because the mayor at the time thought it would be a good idea. Because there is no reason why Angoulême should be believe me, no reason why this town should be the capital of comic strips. No reason. It was a crazy mayor, spent a lot of money, he managed really badly, so the town lost a lot of money. But he did great things, badly. But this was a great, the town was ruined after that. People paid a lot of taxes to cover up, to recover from what happened. But he launched a lot of festivals and stuff. So the festival is international. Eisenbergel was there last year. Like, you know, people go there all the time. So that's the festival I was telling you about earlier. That LGBT BD go to has a booth and all. So this guy is from La Rochelle, which is a small town really close. La Rochelle, a lot of Protestants went to Canada from La Rochelle. And there is a town near New York called La Rochelle, founded by Huguenots from there. So, and he moved to Angoulême to do the Beaux-Arts. And he made those journals about his everyday life, like very realistic, see the beautiful drawing about his life and the fact that he was molested down the street, the fact that he would go at night where men meet each other in the down the and it became mainstream because Ego Comics was all over. But you have to know, Ego Comics was his creation. He did not self-edit, so to speak, but in a way he did, because he created his publisher, the publishing house, to publish his stuff without having to ask any permission to talk about what he wanted, and he published his friend's stuff. So that was a next step, freedom and creativity. Turning point. Published a gathering of people addressing that LGBT, those LGBT issues and representing. No, he hates that. He comes to our booth every year, kind of. He's kind of obnoxious. He doesn't want to be there at all, and that's his right. But just to show you that, funnily enough, the gay man that published the comic strip that was the most mainstream, that really is a landmark, would not like to be here and doesn't really identify with all that thing for many reasons. I don't want to judge or analyze why, but that's reality. I'm jumping to today, basically. In the meantime, many things were produced. Today, though, just to stress the difference between Northern America, or at least the US, and France, when gay goes mainstream, still it is to deal with homophobia and painful stuff, So, or social issues of the moment. For example, Les Autres Gens is a mainstream series, comic series, very popular. And, of course, they included gay characters to deal with what was happening at the moment, gay marriage debates. But as soon as the debate is out, there is no gay characters. See what I mean? This was the kind of thing that happened in the US in the 80s. Oh yeah, we're going to put a gay character dying of AIDS, You see what I mean? So I appreciate the effort, but it shows how society is not ready. I'm not judging the people. The people are just doing with what they have, with what society is at the moment. Bleu est une couleur chaude. You must have heard about it here because they made a movie of it. It was kind of controversial for some reason. I didn't watch it because I heard so much about it. I was tired. I was like, oh shit, I won't see it.
The sex scene of 30 minutes.
Yeah, no, but it's not the sex scene, especially for France. They don't care. It's not the sex scene. So it was kind of like spaghetti and tomato sauce, and it was long and kind of embarrassing. And why? Anyway, but that's not important.
Because the author, Julie Moreau, is not responsible for this, and we're talking about comics today. One day somebody called her and said, we would like to make a movie based on your book, and she said yes, but the rest is not her, so I don't want to talk about the movie. So her book, Julie Moreau, I knew her when she had her blog. She was a little art student, she had a blog. And she was openly gay, but under a pseudonym. And then she became really professional. She had to earn a living, and she made that comic strip. And Glénat, big publishing house, published it. And everybody was like, "Oh, this is great! They published it. This is great. It shows French society is changing." And Glénat, that's good for them. And for me, it's not really a sign of progress because it's a story about. Suffering because you're a lesbian and people judge you, and then you commit suicide, and your girlfriend leaves you, and then you commit suicide again, and then you jump off a bridge. And I don't want to sound like I'm judging her story because she's young, she's very young, and so for her it's a coming out story typical of early years. But for me, the story is not at all revolutionary or a sign of emancipation, if you see what I mean. It's very classic. Homosexuals suffer, and we should be nice to them. Okay, so it's a really good thing. La Lesbienne Invisible is a comic strip based on a stand-up comic show. Wonderful by Rosemary, very funny show I saw in Paris. Everything, she was published by this Delcourt, by this publisher, very mainstream, so we could see that as a sign of progress. It is. But still, it deals with homophobia and prejudice. It's great. But I'm just saying, we don't have as much as you have here, like in the X-Men and stuff. Just, oh yeah, by the way, the character is gay. He's also jumping off skyscrapers. But oh yeah, he also has a little. It's always the main topic, and it's about coming out and homophobia. And it was very much of a commercial project too. They basically called her, just like the movie, they called her and they said, I know the story behind it, they called her and they said, would you like to make a comics based on your show? And they hooked her up with an artist who happens to be very talented and a lesbian, just really coming out. And they made that project because they thought it would sell. And you see what I mean? It's not something that really came from the guts of the comic strip scene. It's a project. Just like Projet 17 Mai, it's for the, how do you call it here, Idaho? Do you pronounce it like this? You say that, Idaho? I'm not sure. Because it's Idaho, And this LGBT publisher publishes now every year. It's new. It's been going on for a year. They publish an anthology of comics, but about homophobia mostly, because it's for Idaho. So even then, who are LGBT, make that effort only to address the negative aspect of the LGBT experience. You see what I mean? And also what shocks me a little bit is that they don't contact people like me doing comics for the sake of comics, people who've been expressing themselves for years. They contact people who are not gay, who are good artists. They contact people who are gay but who are more into the mainstream because they have an audience that's different. For example, Jérôme participates in that. He started, he had a blog, he was telling stories about his boyfriends and how it was hard finding a boyfriend and he broke up, and straight girls loved that work. He became very popular and he was published. It was kind of a straight girl comics about gay love. You see what I mean? Like they have the gay mangas for straight girl. That's really a monster. But, so for me it's strange. And I could go and call them and tell them, by the way, did you realize that this is kind of, we could go further together. But I don't even want to because I don't think it's, time. Les gens normaux, same thing as Projet 17 Mai. People who have nothing to do with the LGBT activist scene, nothing to do with the alternative LGBT comic world. But very talented people and serving a cause. But I don't see what you have here, you know, with other topics. So, to finish, people started telling their stories and sharing their stories, and what really made a difference was blogging. We have an example with La Petite Blonde. This was really successful. It's two people. She writes the stories and he, Galou, draws. And they started a series self-published about their everyday turmoil. But again, it was about turmoil related to homophobia. So I think we're still at the stage of, you know, the coming out. And I wanted to do for a while. That's why for a long time I didn't do anything. Because I felt, I was young, I felt, oh, I could share that. And then I felt, we're beyond that. And now I'm trying to tell other stories because I think that we're beyond that. This has been done so much. And issues is love, broken, and they are non-professional people. You have to know there is a real dichotomy in French scene between people like me, like, oh yeah, I'm an English teacher of comics, so I'm an art school and freelance graphic design strip artist, and they are taken seriously. When people ask me what I do, they are waiting for me to talk about a book that was published and how many were sold and if I'm famous. If they don't know my name, they don't want to know about me. It's a problem we have also in the professional world. You need to have a diploma that they expect you to have, much more than in Northern America, where they're looking at the whole picture of who you are and what experience you have and what's your potential. This is changing now. But it's very normative in a way. You know, we can be great for other things, but not for that. So it's very normative, and people ask me what I do, and they basically have nothing to answer because I'm self-published, alternative stuff, and this and that. It's hard to describe. And I don't get as much feedback and positive exchange as I have here, because there is a real difference. You're taken seriously if you're published by a mainstream publisher. But it's changing because of new media. She's a professional. That's her work. And that's really weird because she's openly lesbian, and she would not want to have anything to do with us, LGBT. I had problems, you know, I invited her to join our group and then she didn't want to, and anyway, don't want to dwell on this. But at the same time, suddenly, I see this year, she published this book about her love experiences, her exes that she, you know, buries, like, and so she's out of the closet, she's talking about her lesbian life, but she won't identify and participate in that visibility. You see what I mean? So it's really hard to get together. I feel very lonely as a lesbian artist, to tell you the truth. We're very few not to exist, but to get together. Oh, and this is what I did with a group of friends. I do have the book, but it's a collective. So this is the history, it's here. It's the history of, it's a lesbian French history. So it is, that's why I put it in that part. It is about personal histories, but it's fiction. But it's based on true stories, but we made up characters. And so it's personal histories, but throughout the years, with the background of true history. And it's very documented with a chronology in the end, a bibliography, and we thought it was lacking. There was no story of the lesbian experience in France since it really started, you know, in the 70s with the feminist movement. And it was quite successful, but only to a certain extent, you know. And it's getting there, it will get there, but yeah, we did it. So.
Last slide. The internet. As I was saying, the internet really allowed everybody to share their stories and share their talent, or whether they had a talent or not. Some people can really draw and make comics, and they're awesome comics because they have great ideas and they improve over the years. So everybody could try out, and we started making friends like that. I have friends today, also in other countries, that I met through the internet, and we finally met physically. Sometimes years later, like this Polish girl, I finally met her in Berlin, you know, and it's wonderful. So I don't know what we would have done without the internet, but I remember being a kid without the internet. So, and I remember we would write each other and send each other stuff. So maybe this is what we would have done. And this actually helps breaking the gap between the professionals and the amateurs, the people who are just, you know, making that, you self-published. This does not exist. What is self-published does not exist. You know, this has broken the gap between the two. Because look at him, for example, Nawak. That's this guy. He works in a hospital, psychiatric hospital. So he's got a job. You know, he's working every day, and he also draws comics, cartoons about political life. And when the